my first thought in response, that's a good question, is that I don't want to be stuck with the connotations of a framework as an enclosed space. I think it begins to get at some aspects of it in some ways, just for some purposes. But a paradigm is clearly something different. It's more on the order of a model that somehow is symbolically representative of the whole field.
Right.
And there may be, well, I can conceive of, let's say, being a paradigm of what philosophical anthropology is, or what the human nature is, or something to that effect. Alternatively, is a paradigm understanding of rational inference, the paradigm understanding of metaphor, whatever. And it may well be that even under the post-critical frame of reference, there might be more than one workable paradigms on a single topic there, but they have family resentment. Okay. So I don't want
to be a felicitous point of access.
Yeah.
What you're trying to get.
Right, to help the imagination get around it.
So it's a hypothesis in a sense, a hypothetical model.
Yeah.
Maybe that's redundant.
Yeah, except that once a paradigm shift takes place, certainly as Kuhn understands it, it's generally not regarded as a hypothetical model.
The metaphors work?
Yeah. So I'm willing to go with words, phrases, metaphors, whatever, to characterize what it is to be post-critical. And I'm open to anything.
Could it be a way of thinking? A way of thinking rather than a what? And I wanted to understand.
I'm not going to be serving as, say, you're right or wrong.
Ron wants to say right or wrong.
I don't.
I wanted to underscore what you said at the end. I had no idea what Bill's philosophy was, his own philosophy. And I wonder if that's part of the meaning of post-critical, which has more to do with a way, which is not an explicit conceptual system, but a how. It's a way of functioning in dialogue with students and in dialogue in your thinking with these people he's reading. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
I'm always interested in what the relationship between post-critical is and post-liberal is. A term that's widely used by a lot of theology, and how they line up and how they don't. Which I think could give some insights to it as well.
Could take a day at least to discuss it.
I'm sorry, I'm working outside the box. Post-liberal. As in George Lindbeck's Nature Doctrine.
Like liberation.
Make me
Would
yell.
there be a natural interest in contrasting with postmoderns also?
Okay. Dick.
It occurred to me, and this was brought home by Diane's paper earlier, that the figures she looked at privileged the person over the factual. And I'd like to call on a scholastic distinction that was once made in understanding the Eucharist. Somebody said, it's the actual body of Christ, but not the real body of Christ. I think there's an ontological privileging over actuality over factuality that to me grasps a lot of what's going on in what we're calling post-critical.
Okay. Do we want to put it into either of those or still in general?
I don't know.
This isn't, this putting something here doesn't mean it couldn't be there.
Yeah. Well, I think in general.
Okay. An ontological privileging?
Ontological privileging of the actual over the factual. No?
No, okay, sorry. Forget that.
The actuality is the realm of action.
And is factual the realm of having happened?
Factual, in my way of thinking here, is events, things.
Which is veridical. Actual.
Both, they have their own, they all have their own.
And do I have this right here, actual over the real?
I'm sorry,
Privileging of actual over
I said factual.
factual. I'm sorry, I got that wrong.
Rhymes.
Yeah, well, that's why.
Nobody knows.
Real would work too, but.
I really take seriously the idea of Kant as the paradigmatic critical philosopher.
Okay,
And-
so post-Kant.
Well, yeah, well, there's a sense in which what Kant was doing was trying to limit knowledge, and the post-critical is in a way trying to go the other direction.
This is my caricature of you.
Of me?
Of your words.
Oh.
Of
The
What's-
unlimitedization of
as you were saying, it's beyond Kant. Kant tried to limit
he was wanting to limit what we can know.
what we can know.
What we can know, and he was though he says he was trying to make room for faith in the preface to the critique. He was limiting what we can know, getting rid of all the speculative ideas that had gone before him, and I don't suggest that Polanyi's wanting to revitalize the speculative role, but he's wanting to say, look, there is more to knowing than can fit into the Kantian schema.
Could you put that up
Yeah.
under Polanyi? More to knowing than can
There's
fit
another,
under the Kantian schema. Dick?
Another-
And that- I don't know who is.
oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead.
There's another way of putting what Ron just said that I like better, and that is that rejecting the critical question as being a good question. The critical question being, how can I know anything outside of my own thoughts?
So,
And that was the question that God had, or that Descartes had to invoke the ontological proof for the existence of God in order to be guaranteed that what he thought was real was actually really out there.
You're
Yeah, well,
talking about
Kant
subjectivism.
thought you couldn't know things.
Pardon me?
Kant thought you couldn't know things.
In themselves. Descartes thought before Kant.
Well, what they really are, you can know phenomena.
Well, the reason I bring up-
we're going to keep his characterization.
Yeah,
Would you
yeah.
like to add? Would you like to add Richard's characterization up here? What would we phrase in a relatively brief form?
A rejection of the Cartesian problem
Great.
of no, and particularly not the mind-body dualism so much as the Cartesian epistemological problem of knowing anything outside of my own thoughts.
Descartes' whole system of systematic doubt. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Exactly.
taking Pauline next, okay?
A somewhat more positive statement, I think, of this idea that was just expressed is crediting our tacit intimations. Now,
Okay,
oftentimes, you know,
That's
we're
clearly
talking about
one.
struggling with two different understandings of critical.
Yeah.
The popular and the more specialized that we're talking about. Same thing applies to personal. You know, I think a person who is characterized, as we would understand it, by a modern style of thinking, would see a book entitled Personal Knowledge and say, hey, I'm for that. Thinking personal means subjective or private.
okay, so the personal beyond the subjective?
I'm going to say we have to be careful about,
Oh.
because we could go into an infinite regression of saying, well, let's define Kantianism, let's define what we
Okay.
mean by Cartesianism, and
Do you want to add something up here? You don't have to. You can
I,
just be clarification of what's been said and a comment about a process.
let's say just avoiding the infinite regression of definitions, where we're defining words by including words that need definition themselves.
Okay?
Okay, to be more elementary, under the generic revaluation of the first and second person perspectives, as opposed to the third, or maybe the reclamation of those perspectives, first and second.
Okay, let's put it, I like that.
I'm feeling bad about the Poteet column.
He didn't have any.
Nothing.
Well, the eye will die, I mean, the kind of the,
Let me put something there.
I've got a couple more, just real quick.
I have something for the
Yes.
tonicity.
Great.
We haven't really broached
No.
that category yet.
And could you elaborate a little of what you understand?
Well, it was part of what I left out from my talk yesterday. Bill's constant insistence on the radical nature of tonicity, which he describes the end of recovering the ground as the mind bodily tonicity of each of us and all of us together must be radical. So the searching, and then he later talks about we need to possess the tonus in the world with every expression of our being, from simple speaking to a logos directed toward order, meaning, rationality, and value. You want to summarize it now?
That's too much for me to write now.
Well, I
That's,
mean, tonicity has expression not only of
Yeah,
our individual
that's
selves, but collective selves
yeah.
in a tonal way. So, I mean, there's affect as well as cognition there. There's something that I don't see in those general
Right,
considerations. Yeah.
okay, okay.
Another way to say it.
Will this capture it for the moment? Just ready?
I'm happy with tonicity, yeah.
Okay,
If everyone knows it.
before comment, you had your hand up.
Well, I'm past the point of when it's maybe
Sorry.
useful to say this, but
We can go back.
maybe it's a more generalized way of saying, because there's a dictum involved, that epistemology does not necessarily precede ontology. There was a dictum that said epistemology
Yes,
comes
yes.
first, and then you can do ontology in the light of a new epistemology.
Do you think that's Poteet?
I don't know whether that's Poteet
Well,
or not.
put it
It probably
over here.
fits Poteet to some
Okay.
extent, but it's more general, I'd say.
Okay.
So a rejection,
Ontology does not.
of the priority of epistemology.
Okay,
over
right.
ontology.
And speaking, preceding epistemology. Which is grounded in our being, preceding, speaking.
I want to put something on the Poteet column. I was really impressed by his sustained assault on the philosophical assault on the ordinary.
Or how
The
about
quotidian.
how about this for Poteet?
Yeah.
Reclamation of the ordinary.
Yes.
And the everyday.
Yeah. Are you okay with that?
Except not in Heidegger's sense.
No, no.
Okay. Ordinary and the everyday.
Everyday.
Okay.
And the primordial grounding of the ordinary.
That's
I was really struck by how, in rereading, how often he used the word primordial, whatever that means.
I don't know if this helps, but.
Of the ordinary, you want that added?
Yeah, or a lot of things, yeah. But of your everyday being in the world, yeah.
I'm
Okay.
not fooling around.
And Brandel.
You want to put that down?
I mean, it speaks to me, I may not speak to this guy. On the Poteet.
Oh, under Poteet. Okay. Yeah, that works. That works.
Serious fooling around.
Isn't there a song about fooling around?
I think of something that would go under both Polanyi.
Okay, just a minute. I want to catch up on a few people. Yes, back here, Robert.
Well, I had one thing, but first commenting on fooling around. That's play. That's play. Playing. Just the whole realm of what playing means is very important, Poteet. Then it helps me, this is probably implied in tonicity, but crediting the epistemological validity of affect is something that is important to me from Poteet.
that stronger in Polanyi than in Petit? The whole dimension of feeling, passion.
I think it's in both.
My reading is more from Petit,
Is it?
and I don't have,
Okay.
I can't make a judgment.
Yeah, I want to make sure also we don't leave out aesthetics, affect as color. You know, that Cezanne book that has, or whatever the Cezanne essay is that I think you're going to talk about later, right? That, you know, I think that is something that Petit claims in a way that Polanyi doesn't. Is that your reading?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
One thing that Poteet used to always do is to put a wedge, and Polanyi does too, between what people say they do and what they actually do. So that in science, if you take a look at what science does, as opposed to what they say they're doing, you see something quite different. And I think that's one of the great contributions of Polanyi, and I think that Bill just expands that beyond science to...
I'm going to put it in Petit, but we can credit it over here too. Being alert.
Isn't there a real difference between what scientists do and what philosophers say that scientists do?
Yes, very good.
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
I do.
I
A
don't
lot,
think
lot of
so.
scientists buy into the bad descriptions philosophy.
They do. I think the scientists buy into it. And I talk to scientists all the time. Maybe they're not very good ones, but this is what they're into this account of what they do.
They have no hermeneutic.
Yeah.
Any description of scientific method in any textbook
Yeah.
will tell you that.
Yeah.
So,
I changed it a little bit. Being alert to the ironic contradiction between what's said and what is done, but I would also want to say between what they are, how they're actually operating.
Once a master of irony, always a master.
yeah, but just to connect to what we heard earlier, this is the testimony of practice. I think, which we.
And practice. Here we go. That would include
I would say, I'm not sure where this fits, a recognition that various dualisms in language and thought are perhaps unavoidable, but inherently problematic. And that struck me more strongly in the study of Buddhism than it did Petit and Polanyi, but it was there, I thought. Certainly got mind-body relations there.
Have you become a Buddhist?
No, though some Buddhists might claim me, because for some Buddhists, if you meditate, you're a Buddhist, whether you've taken the triple refuge or not. And I meditate, but I haven't taken the triple refuge.
Polanyi Meditations, their friends reach out is a Buddhist document.
Okay, I'm losing track of hands. I haven't heard from Gus yet.
Do we have doubt?
Not yet. Where's that and how?
Well, certainly Polanyi's self-definition in that 60 letter, which I've got in my paper, but I've got it here on the screen. I've given the book towards a post-critical philosophy. This was meant to say, in my view, the great intellectual revolution, which is marked by the names of Descartes, etc., is nearing its final limits. This movement was guided by the principle that doubt is the solvent of error which leaves behind truth.
Okay, that's really central.
I meant on that other category up there, not a rejection of dualism, but a rejection of Cartesian universal doubt. So what I'm saying, that we're very much on that same page.
I doubt it.
I'm interested in the transition to a post-critical perspective and wonder if it would be proper to say that for the post-critical perspective, one's entry into that perspective is more closely akin to conversion than to education. That is...
As we would normally, let's say, education under the usual model or something.
Right.
Okay.
From Poteet, education was conversion. I mean, that's what, Huh?
Remember him saying that?
I remember him doing that. I mean, it wasn't just this, it was you.
Uh-huh.
Well, maybe that would be the way to put it, that for the post-critical perspective, education is conversion and not accumulation of knowledge.
Or another way to put it would be, all education is conversion, and what are we being converted to? Or metamorphosis.
Or getting free from a picture that holds us captive.
Yeah, that's really perfectly dismembered.
There you go. Okay. I remember that.
Yes, under general considerations, rejection of Cartesian dualism, but then explicitly.
By the way, this is the general consideration.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. We should put rejection of Cartesian dualism under general considerations.
Okay,
Considerations.
a
And
lot of things there can go here. It's just that.
well, but he meant. Well, now we have universal doubt. We don't have rejection of Cartesian dualism under Polanyi anymore.
Oh, that's right. So we can put it under here.
So that's why I was saying that. But my larger point, and Petit's explicit focus development of body, mind, body. His contribution, one of them.
Say it again.
The focus on body and mind, body.
Well, for this, you're supposed to have the qualifier, mind, bodily, tonicity, too.
Oh,
Those
okay.
Those two should.
Should we go there?
Yes.
Yeah, mind, bodily, tonicity, yes. That was a larger phrase that Bill used.
Okay.
Under general considerations, the possibility of a response to the threat of skepticism as well. I mean, a response to the skeptical question.
Say a little more. I'm not quite.
I mean, if it's a critique of or putting Cartesian dualism and universal doubt into question, then it's also a response to the threat of skepticism. You know, that leads to
All right.
where skepticism can't actually become a philosophical problem anymore.
Let me pose this in terms of a slightly different question, but maybe it can help a little bit here. Okay, how is the postmodern a response to skepticism?
No, post-critical.
How is it? Yes. How is the post-critical a response to skepticism?
Because it suggests that somehow the skeptical question is not relevant. Because methodological doubt has been itself undermined and doubted. And then how I would see post-critical then is like a kind of criticism more critical than the history or legacy of Cartesian.
Meditations and recovering the ground. Polanyi Meditations subtitle says In Search of a Post-Critical Logic. The subtitle of Recovering the Ground says Exercises in Critical.
Yeah, but Poteet does say, he spends a great deal of time in the latter explaining that this is a different understanding of critical criticism than the post-critical understanding of criticism. And so it's different.
Put that down, how to think critically within a post-critical framework, wherever it goes. Well, it's also a general question. Yeah,
I want to hear you.
Is it different
I'd like
or
you to
not?
repeat that thing.
Is Poteet's whole critique of modern culture critical or is it post-critical?
Post-critical because
well, if that's the question,
Recovering the critical. But is he using critical reason to criticize the critical?
Well,
it's a new category of criticism.
Yes.
It's of course, in some sense, it is. But in that very moment, in that very activity, the whole notion of criticism changes.
I agree
with the vocabulary.
How does it change?
How did you become post-critical?
Mel, would you be satisfied with this? Just for getting something on the board, without putting all of what's coming out. That a new understanding
of critical reason.
Right.
Post-critical criticism.
Yes.
Wrong.
Diane, one question I had for you was whether you would say, even though Poteet might be a modernist for you, would he still be post-critical?
Yeah, for me, the critical stand in modernism is a very limited strand.
Okay, can you explain that? I haven't heard from Jim, then again.
Well, just another way to put a lot here is rejection of explicitism.
Okay, that's certainly.
Is that a word?
Okay,
You
rejection
just
of
made it up.
explicitism.
Did you hear it? It's actual.
One of the main general features here is freedom to invent new terms. No, first Ben, I'm sorry.
Under contributions from Poteet, I would like to add Poteet. Well, this is kind of important to me because I keep sort of doing this incredibly dexterous, tight, high wire analysis. And I'm caught off guard at the number of times that we find ourselves dancing around, well, it wasn't clear and that didn't do that. He has a very strong account of his positive affirmation of what happened during his Orphic development, if I can put it that way. Some of this, I hasten to add, is stuff I sent to David. It's just handwritten letters from Greece because I was working on Orpheus and he was working on Orpheus, et cetera, et cetera. One line that sticks with me, not in that letter, but another that I was disarmed this morning by Jim Steins, who's carried around for 3 decades a question of why the hell I wrote such a stupid article in the thing that he didn't, I wouldn't allow to be reduced to computer words or something. And I'm making fun of you. I love you, Jim.
I love you, buddy. And I was with you while you were arguing with the Home Office.
Oh, I was arguing with the Home Office. Oh, well, you were my man in the Home Office.
It was all in heart.
At any rate, Bill, in response to that, wrote me a handwritten note, and he has a wonderful, very revealing line in which he said, my whole life I've had a deep longing in my writing, a deep longing to appear in my writing to my reader in a way that enables him to appear to himself. Now, in a funny kind of way, this sort of skips all this stuff. And I'm sitting here thinking, what are we doing methodologically here? My just sort of seat of the pants sense is if he were sitting here, he would have passed out about an hour ago just from the lack of breathable air. Sort of trying to figure out what this stuff is. And I don't see the separation. When I read some of the papers quickly, and I apologize and do you a disservice, I know, but there was a lot of emphasis on intellectual something, intellectual this, intellectual that. And in a funny kind of way, he was a consummate intellectual. Another kind of way, in the stuff I sent Wally, he was very clear that in reading Elizabeth Sewell, first of all, back in 1958, in hooking up with Mustakis and talking about Orpheus and etc., out of which he fashioned several sculptures, some of which I have, and then saying, read Philip Sheridan, The Marble Thrashing Floor, read George Zephyrus, read Cyclianos, he was very clear that his, what we've been calling dismemberment, because he called it that, was also an appearance to himself and an affirmation of himself that allowed him to think in certain ways, live in certain ways, make certain choices, be himself in a very particular way. And the contribution that I think we would all say, almost sort of admiringly and emotionally, oh, he made a great contribution to my life, or he transformed my life. I don't think his was so much a conversion. I don't think I was converted, but I did appear to myself, and he and I appeared to each other in ways that were confirming of our authenticity, our legitimacy. I went to breakfast this morning and picked up one of the most I'm an obituary New York Times reader, which is a very interesting way to look at how people's
So
lives
dark.
are described. Huh?
It's so dark.
No, it's not. This is the point. This morning I picked up at breakfast in my sort of groggy way before coffee and sitting at the table, and there was at the top of the page a line, a lady I'd never heard of. She died at age 47. She was a reporter for the Palm Beach, whatever newspaper it is, and it said her name, whatever it is, Ruth Johnson, I'll say, lived with joy. That was a headline for her obituary. Turns out she had ALS, she had, but somehow in the midst of that, lived with joy. Well, when to talk about Poteet and his contribution, first of all, his contribution is sitting in his room in one very profound way. And so I think it's important to keep clear, and this is no disparagement of the enterprise that we're engaged in now or the any of that sort of stuff, that is a very particular kind of set of professional interests. And it didn't always interest him, in one sense. He lived with joy in so many different ways, outside the classroom, outside writing, outside all kinds of things, and attended many celebrations for my family and kids and things. They're just pure joy. And also, we miss too easily what is at hand. I mean, if I've read 10,000 obituaries, say, in the last 20 years, I would say there are not more than 6 who ever heard of Michael Polanyi, or more than 2 who heard of William Hardman Poteet. Did they live post-critical lives? I mean, I've got people who are living joyous lives who never went to college, who are fulfilled. And I think the more important question is, how is it that life is sufficient for its own fulfillment? That do we really have to perform this extraordinarily careful surgery and post-op to be able to live joyously?
No,
I would say no.
No, I agree. But it seems to me that at least an appropriate unpacking of what these are about addresses that.
I would say dangerously close to not being the case because of the inherent methodology of listing and comparing and cross-referencing and so on and so on. I understand, I mean, we all grew up with that to be smart and all that, but I'm not sure that that's where that leads.
No post-critical despair.
I've been called on.
For me.
I've been called on.
Go ahead.
Can I go?
Yeah.
One of the things that I see both Poteet and Polanyi doing is giving us ideal type models and an anti-ideal type model. The ideal type model of what it is to be a good human being. And the anti-ideal type has to do with a whole number of images, one of which is, captured by Cartesian, another one in Polanyi is captured by moral inversion. But that contrast between an image of what a good human being is going to look like and what a not so good human being, or even a bad human being looks like.
Jim mentioned Elizabeth Sewell.
Do you have something you want to put up in connection with that?
Ideal type, anti-ideal type of the human person.
And I was already sitting here then thinking of the analogous moment to this moment at the Dayton Conference in 1972.
Oh, yeah.
And people were sitting around fussing and trying to figure out, in Polanyi's presence, what did Polanyi mean by this, that, and the other? And Polanyi's attitude was, you need to be thinking about what you mean by this, that, and the other. At which point, Elizabeth Sewell got up and said, I think we should dance.
Yeah, dance is a huge point point of emphasis, especially in the Orphic voice, but lots of other, and the marriage of the impossibility of not being able to separate the dancer from the dance, as Yeats put it, is an enormously methodologically important tool for research, he calls it. And
But if we try to meet the problems that Sam talked about last night, don't we have to do some of this in order to dismantle this structure that we're living in here at Yale?
If you
I
would
mean,
like,
this is
if
power.
you would like to, but I don't have to live. For example, some of us were talking outside. I have not used a single text by Poteet, Polanyi, even Elizabeth Sewell, who's my gal. But I have used what I do in my honor seminars and whatever, but most importantly for 30 years as an administrator. Reimagining how people can be together intelligently, namely in the academy, is an extraordinary problem, of course, you all know. But reading Poteet or Polanyi or whatever doesn't open that up, even for me. But what I open up is an extension of my own capacity to be myself. And that kind of, so, and I don't make light of this, I mean, I just would like to note that this is all important if you think it's important. And you like to do it and you commit your life to it. It has enormous consequences within, to use Kuhn's thing, paradigms. It's great. I note parenthetically that Hannah Arendt has in her, what's her 2-volume blah blah work?
Judgment? The Mind.
Life of the Mind. Something. Has a devastating analysis of models. What it means to hold a model and use that. But nevertheless, I think, David, that of course it's important. But I have a lovely nude painted by Ed Rice, who's probably South Carolina's most noted artist, who comes to my house occasionally, and he knows nothing about post-critical. He knows it doesn't occur to, he wouldn't, But if you look at one of his paintings, same thing with Moustakis. I mean, Moustakis doesn't know all this stuff, But if you've ever been in the presence or seen him dance,
Why should I believe you?
Well, I was surprised.
I mean, it's a good question.
No, of course it's a good question. You shouldn't necessarily. On the other hand, there is a credibility to the authentic person. Hannah Arendt again says in the introduction to one of those things, she cites a quote from one of Socrates' pals, and I'm old as we are, I can't remember these things anymore, in which Socrates was being accused of making an error, and his antagonist was shown to be right. And his pal said, if Socrates is wrong, by heaven, I stand with Socrates in error rather than his antagonist.
Because I do believe you. Well, I do believe you, is what I'm saying, but why should
I understand, but I'm just saying the priority of the integrity of a person, not the personal as a category, a person, authenticates the capacity to be believed, even if you're wrong.